All right. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. Continuing with our look at the Torah portion. We are looking at the annual Torah portion this week. We are looking at Yithro. Yithro. Torah portion is 18, chapter 18, verse 1, all the way up to 20, verse 23. 18, chapter 18, verse 1, all the way up to 20, verse 23. Yithro is a very interesting Torah portion. It begins centering around the father-in-law of Moses. The father-in-law of Moses lets us into a little bit of an understanding of the relationship between the two of them, and also what can be considered really the conversion of Yithro, and also a quite amazing turn of events that happens afterwards. So I want to look at a few things in this Torah portion. We plan on doing just a short little recap. It's so packed full of things. I did want to talk about a few things in here. So if we go over to Yithro, Exodus chapter 18, we'll read Exodus 18. I want to read 1 through 12. Exodus 18, chapter 18, 1 through 12.
Writing, and Yithro, the priest of Midian, Moshe's father-in-law, heard all that Elohim had done for Moshe and for Israel, his people, that Yahweh had brought Israel out of Mitzrayim. And Yithro, Moshe's father-in-law, took Zipporah, the wife of Moshe, after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, and he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eliezer. And for he said, the Elohim of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Yithro, Moshe's father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moshe in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of Elohim. And when he had said to Moshe, I, your father-in-law, Yithro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. And Moshe went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed them and asked each other about their welfare. And they went into the tent. And Moshe told his father-in-law all that Yahweh had done to Pharaoh and to the Mizrahites for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them on the way, how Yahweh had delivered them. And Yithro rejoiced for all the good which Yahweh had done for Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Mizrahites. And Yithro said, Blessed be Yahweh, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Mizrahites, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and he has delivered the people from under the hand of the Mizrahites. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the mighty ones, indeed, in the matter in which they acted proudly above them. Then Yithro, the father-in-law of Moshe, brought an ascending offering and other slaughterings unto Elohim. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with their father-in-law of Moshe before Elohim.
Okay, very good. So, here again we see kind of a rejoining of Yithro, Moses, Moses' wife, children, all coming together here after they have left out from Egypt. And an interesting thing happens. Moses begins to recount all of the things, the signs, and the wonders that the Most High had performed over in Egypt to get the people at the place where they currently were. And when Moses told all of these things to Yithro, verse 9 says that he rejoiced, right? He rejoiced over this news that he had received from Moses. And so Yithro, as it begins there, it tells us, the scripture tells us in the first verse that Yithro was in fact a priest of Midian. He tells us, the scripture tells us that Yithro was not only was he the father-in-law of Moses, which I guess they tell us that kind of second, but first of all, they tell us this man's name and the fact that he is a priest of Midian. I think that that's interesting. The fact that that the scripture, inspiration, has decided to give us this information because it gives us a little background into Yithro and who he is. He who may not necessarily be connected to the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he's a spiritual man. He is a priest. He's not just a person that is a Midianite, but he is a priest in Midian. Excuse me. And so when we see that Moses here begins to tell him all these things, we see that Yithro hears this news from Moses and he believes. Yithro heard, and he believed. And so this news that he received, Yithro here, this news that he received caused him, as we said, we mentioned here in verse 9, it caused him to rejoice. It caused him to rejoice. He praised the Most High. And the declaration that he declares is interesting. Read again verse 11. Verse 11.
Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the mighty ones, indeed, in the matter in which they acted proudly above them.
Okay, so Yithro comes to a particular understanding after he heard, after he believed, after he faiths, right? He rejoiced and praised the Most High, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he comes to a particular understanding. He says, now I know that Yahweh is greater than all other gods. And so it's interesting. We talked a little bit about this on last week. This idea of, well, we talked about the idea of fear, and fear being the beginning of, it says that it's the beginning of knowledge, it's the beginning of wisdom. When we think about this process that we see Yithro actually going through, we see him going through this process of really acquiring intimate knowledge of who the Most High is. The scripture says that he, now I know, now I yada, that Yahweh is greater than all Elohim. So he understands who Yahweh is. He knows that there's nobody higher than Elohim. There's nobody greater. Nobody greater than you. He has that understanding, right? Based on what he heard from Moses. Moses told him what happened. He believed the words that came out of the mouth of Moses, and he believed. And based on the things that he heard, that he understood to be the truth, he had a real understanding of who the Most High is and declared the fact, now I know that Yahweh is greater than all other gods. And so it's interesting that we see here, you'll see throughout the scripture proves to us that we have to really have and come to a particular realization of who the Most High really is first. That's Yithro's process here. This Gentile, by the way, he's not Israel, but this is his process. When we look at Israel, that was Israel's process. Israel had to become acquainted with who the Most High is. They became acquainted the same way that Yithro did, only they actually experienced all of the things, and Yithro just heard about it. He just heard, that's all. He just heard about what happened. They saw what happened, but the same result was there is the fact that they believed from their the knowledge of the Most High entering into their minds. The people saw it and it entered in their minds through their eyes. I guess it entered in through their ears too. They heard and they saw. There's various ways that information is able to enter into our minds. No matter how it gets in there, the point is that it must in fact get in there, and then you attained this particular knowledge, right? As Yithro does. And so another interesting thing that we see with Yithro is the fact that not only does this priest of Midian come to be with his son-in-law, Moses, and the people, they're so happy to see one another. The rabbis argue about who bows to who, whether it was Moses bowing to Yithro or Yithro bowing to him when they join one another. But an interesting thing happens when we look later on in that same verse. Let's go down a little bit further here.
I think I see the parallels between Yithro and the Torah. Yeah.
Was that last week?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Was it last
I
week?
think that was last week.
Everything is last week.
Yes. I'm
Yeah.
not saying yes to it being last week. I'm saying yes to there is similarities.
Yeah.
Because yes, there's similarities because you first of all you have this person who's not who there's a disconnect. That's there. There's a disconnect. There's a natural disconnect. He is connected to Israel by marriage, right? Not by default, right? He's not part of Israel. He's connected by his wife, married this Israelite man. And so he comes, he sees, he hears, he has this revelation based on his hearing, and he decides to change his whole situation because by saying that he believes that the Most High is greater than all other gods, then he's obviously greater than whatever god that he was associated with the Midianites. And so by making that declaration, he's basically renouncing the whoever the god of the Midianites is that he served all the way up to this point. And so beyond that, we see that if we go over, I want to read a few more verses over here. If we look at, if we go down to 13, start reading at verse 13.
And it came to be on the next day that Moshe said to rightly rule the people, and the people stood before Moshe from morning until evening.
Oh, sorry, keep going. Oh, well, let's talk about that real quick because Moses, obviously, before we look at the problem that Yithro sees over here, Scripture tells us he's literally stood before the people all day. All day, Moses is before the people judging every situation from morning to evening. Okay, keep on going.
And when the father-in-law of Moshe saw all that he did for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit by yourself? And all the people stand before you from morning until evening."
All day. Yep. Yithro, he can't understand this thing that's going on. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're sitting there all day dealing with all these people all day from morning to evening. And so Yithro, this is the next day. The next day, verse 13 says, and on the next day. So instantly, Yithro, who just found out about this, the Most High, yesterday, he brings a particular experience to the situation. But still, he just finds out about the Most High really yesterday, convinced that this is the greatest Elohim that there is. He's greater than them all. He witnesses Moses dealing with these people all day, and he just jumps right into action. Moses, you can't sit up here and do this. You're gonna be so tired, you're not gonna be worth anything. You need to go and find some righteous men and have them people deal with the day-to-day issues and judgments of the people. And then if it's really serious, then they can come and deal with you. We see in Exodus chapter 18, as far as I know, the only law that's added to the Torah that's created by man. And it's not Moses. It's not even an Israelite man. And he just was converted yesterday, by the way. He says to Moses, if the Most High agrees with this wisdom that I'm giving you, this is what you need to be doing. And the Most High does, in fact, agree. And so it's interesting that we see this, this whole thing given to us, this whole, because really, when we look at all of the law, statutes, commands of the Most High, we could see later on in Torah where we see these things kind of given, and we don't really need this in here, because later we find out that these laws are actually put in place. But it's interesting that inspiration gives us the origins of the elders and the judges, how it's implemented into the Torah, and the how of it being from Yithro. And I always find that so interesting that is that we have this command that's given to us that literally came from the mind of Yithro. All right. So, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments about any of that? Okay, so there's many interesting things in the Torah portion, Yithro, namely the Ten Commandments. But we're not going to necessarily talk about those right now. If you want to look and see what I had to say about the Ten Commandments, you can click on the link in the description and look at chapter 20